The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood on the planet Valeris Prime for 12,000 years. Its walls were made of living crystal that hummed with ancient energy. 417 species sent their representatives to this place. They came to make laws, settle disputes, and decide the fate of worlds. In all that long history, humanity had been nothing more than a small note at the bottom of a very long list. Ambassador. Lisa Monroe stood at the human delegation platform and looked around at the alien faces watching her. Some had scales. Some had tentacles. Some had so many eyes that she had stopped counting. All of them looked at her with the same expression. It was the look you might give to a small animal that had wandered into a meeting where it did not belong. Hi, Counselor Thexel of the Vorn Hegemony called the session to order. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. His voice came through the translation systems as a deep rumble. We are gathered to discuss the situation in the Outer Spiral Arm, Thexel announced. The Kathrani Dominion has made claims to the human colony world designated New Montana. They have positioned a fleet of 3,000 warships at the edge of human space. They have given the humans 30 days to abandon their colony or face destruction. Lisa felt her heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She knew how to hide her feelings. Delegate Wormesh of the Kathrani rose from his platform. He was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales, the mouth full of teeth that looked like they could bite through steel. His people were warriors. They had conquered hundreds of worlds over 10,000 years. No one in the galaxy challenged them directly. The matter is simple, Wormesh said. The humans built their colony on a world that contains the sacred burial grounds of our ancestors. This is a violation of our religious rights. They will leave, or they will be removed. We are not asking for permission. We are informing this council of what will happen. Lisa pressed the button that allowed her to speak. The colony on New Montana was established legally under Galactic Council Charter. We surveyed the planet thoroughly before settling. There were no markers, no warnings, no indication that the world held any significance to any other species. 2 million human beings now call that planet home. We will not abandon them. Wormesh made a sound like rocks grinding together. It was laughter. Then you will watch them die. We have studied your military capabilities, Ambassador. You have 47 combat vessels in your entire fleet. We have 3,000. Your colonial defense forces are equipped with outdated weapons and minimal training. This is not a war. This is an execution. The chamber filled with murmurs. Representatives whispered to each other in dozens of languages. Lisa could see it in their eyes. They agreed with Wormesh. They believed humanity was finished. High Counselor Vexel waved one of his long tendrils for silence. The Council recognizes the difficult position of the human delegation. However, we cannot intervene in disputes between member species. If the humans cannot defend their territory, the consequences are their own responsibility. Lisa had expected this. The Galactic Council was not a government. It was more like a club where powerful species made deals and weaker species tried to survive. Humanity had been a member for less than 2 centuries. They had no allies, no leverage, no voice that mattered. But Lisa had received a message that morning. A message that changed everything. I am authorized to inform this council, she said, her voice steady. That Earth has activated the 31st Expeditionary Force. They will arrive at New Montana in 18 days. Wormesh tilted his massive head. 1 expeditionary force? Is this meant to frighten us, Ambassador? We could destroy 100 of your expeditionary forces without effort. The Council has never seen a human professional military force in action, Lisa replied. You have only observed our colonial defense units. What is coming to New Montana is something different. Something this galaxy has never encountered. On the far side of the chamber, Observer Kellen of the Mendari Collective leaned forward with sudden interest. His species were not warriors. They were watchers, collectors of information, keepers of secrets. For decades, they had gathered fragments of intelligence about human military capabilities. Strange words that appeared in intercepted communications. Combined arms. Fire superiority. Electronic warfare. force multiplication. None of it matched how other species fought their wars. Kellen had tried to warn the council that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. No one had listened. Now, watching Ambassador Monroe speak, without a trace of fear in her voice, he wondered if they should have. 12,000 light-years away. General Samuel Grant stood on the bridge of the command carrier USS Valor and read the activation order for the third time. He was 61 years old, built like a man who had spent his entire life preparing for hard work. His head was shaved clean, and his eyes had the look of someone who had seen terrible things and kept going anyway. "Get me Colonel Diana Price and Major Kevin Hart," he told his aide, "and wake up the 31st. We are going to war." The USS Valor was the largest ship humanity had ever built. It carried 60,000 soldiers, sailors, pilots, and support personnel. It held tanks, artillery, aircraft, and enough supplies to fight for months without resupply. It was not a warship in the traditional sense. It was a mobile military base, designed to project power across the vast distances of space. Colonel Diana Price arrived at the command center within 20 minutes. She was 44 years old, with red hair pulled back tight and a uniform that looked like it had been pressed 5 minutes ago. She commanded the ground forces, 3 full divisions of infantry, armor, and special operations troops. "What is the situation, General?" she asked. Samuel pointed to the tactical display. "Kathrani are threatening New Montana. 3,000 ships. The Council has already written us off. They expect us to surrender or die." Diana studied the enemy positions. "Rules of engagement? Whatever is necessary to protect our people." Major Kevin Hart entered next. He was younger, 38, lean, and quick-moving. He ran the fleet's tactical operations, responsible for coordinating the complex dance of ships, weapons, and information that modern space combat required. "That is a lot of targets," Kevin observed. Looking at the display, Samuel almost smiled. "Think we can handle it?" Kevin pulled up a chair and sat down. "General, the Kathroni have never fought anyone who could actually fight back. They pick on species half their size and call it victory. They have never seen precision strikes or electronic warfare at scale. They think wars are won by whoever brings more ships. They are about to learn otherwise," Diana added. "My ground forces could hold that colony against 10 times what they can land. The Kathrani use mass infantry tactics, swarm the enemy with bodies, and accept the casualties. We use fire superiority and maneuver warfare. They will not know what hit them." Samuel nodded slowly. "I want full battle plans on my desk in 6 hours. We jump in 12, and I want to make a statement. Not just to the Kathrani. To everyone watching. The galaxy needs to understand what happens when you threaten human citizens." He turned to look out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, 2 million people were waiting for help. They were counting on the soldiers of the 31st Expeditionary, forced to save them. Samuel Grant intended to make sure they were not. Disappointed, the journey to New Montana took 16 days through the faster-than-light corridors that connected human space. During that time, the soldiers of the 31st Expeditionary Force did not rest. They trained. They practiced. They prepared for what was coming. Every morning, General Samuel Grant walked through the massive ship and watched his people work. He saw infantry squads running combat drills in the training bays. He saw tank crews practicing their maneuvers in simulator rooms. He saw pilots flying mission after mission in virtual reality, learning the terrain of New Montana until they could navigate it. Blindfolded, these were not conscripts or volunteers called up in an emergency. These were professional soldiers. Men and women who had chosen military service as their life's work. They had trained for years. Some had fought in small conflicts on distant worlds. All of them knew that this mission was different. This was the first time humanity would show the galaxy what it could really do. Colonel Diana Price spent her days in the planning rooms with her division commanders. Maps of New Montana covered every wall. Red markers showed where the Kathrani were likely to land their troops. Blue markers showed defensive positions that had been prepared over the past 6 months. Ever since intelligence reports suggested the Kathrani might make a move, they will come down in waves, Diana explained to her officers. Standard Kathrani doctrine. Mass infantry assault. Overwhelm the defenders with numbers. They expect us to form a line and try to hold it. When we cannot, they expect us to break and run. Major Paul Rodriguez, commander of the 3rd Infantry Division, looked at the maps with a practiced eye. And what are we actually going to do? Diana smiled. It was not a friendly smile. We are going to let them land exactly where we want them. Then we are going to demonstrate what happens when a medieval army meets a modern one. Meanwhile, Major Kevin Hart worked with his team on the space battle component. The Kathrani had 3,000 ships. The human fleet had 140. By any normal calculation, those odds were impossible, but Kevin knew something the Kathrani did not. Space battles in this galaxy were fought the same way they had been fought for thousands of years. 2 fleets lined up facing each other. They closed to weapons range. They traded fire until one side was destroyed or retreated. It was simple, brutal, expensive. Humans did not fight that way. Kevin pulled up the tactical display for his senior officers. Phase 1 is electronic warfare. Before we even engage, we are going to blind them. Our EW platforms will jam their communications, scramble their sensors, and isolate their command ships from the rest of the fleet. They will not be able to coordinate. They will not be able to share information. Each ship will be fighting alone. Lieutenant Commander Susan Chen nodded slowly. Phase 2. Precision strikes. While they are still trying to figure out what happened to their sensors, our stealth bombers will hit their critical targets. Carriers, command vessels, supply ships. We take out their ability to project power and sustain operations in a single coordinated attack in Phase 3. Asked another officer, Kevin switched the display to show the full engagement plan. Phase 3 is the main fleet action, but by then they will already be crippled. No command structure, no resupply, no coordination. 3,000 ships that cannot talk to each other are not a fleet. They are just 3,000 targets. Back on Valeris Prime, Ambassador Lisa Monroe waited for news and tried to keep the other species from discovering just how nervous she was. The Council had voted not to intervene. Most representatives expected humanity to surrender within days. Several species had already begun negotiating with the Kathrani for salvage rights to human vessels. Only Observer Kellen of the Mendari seemed uncertain. He approached Lisa one evening in the diplomatic gardens, walking quietly through the alien flowers that glowed in the darkness. Ambassador Monroe, he said, "May I ask you a question?" Lisa turned to face him. Kellen was humanoid in shape, but his skin was pale blue and his eyes were solid black. His species had never fought a war. They survived through information, through knowing things others did not. "Of course," she replied, "your people face destruction. Your fleet is outnumbered 20 to 1. Your colony has no hope of evacuation, and yet you show no fear. Either you are the finest actor I have ever encountered, or you know something the rest of us do not." Out. Lisa considered her answer carefully. Humanity has been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. We have spent our entire existence learning how to kill things bigger and stronger than ourselves. We are not good at many things, Observer Kellen, but we are very, very good at war. The Kathrani have conquered hundreds of worlds. They have conquered hundreds of worlds that could not fight back. They have never faced an opponent who could match them. They do not know what real war looks like. Lisa paused. They are about to learn. On New Montana, Colonial Governor Patricia Chen addressed her people from the Capitol building in Armstrong City. Behind her, evacuation transports were lifting off, carrying children and essential civilians to orbital shelters. Those who remained were volunteers. People who refused to abandon their homes. "Help is coming," Patricia told them. "I have received word from Earth. The 31st Expeditionary Force is on its way. I ask only that you trust in our soldiers and in each other. We have faced hard times before. We have always survived. We will survive this too." In the outer system, the Kathrani fleet had taken up position and waited for the human reinforcements to arrive. Fleetmaster Gorthon commanded from his flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. He had fought in 50 campaigns. He had never lost. "How many ships do the humans have?" he asked his tactical officer, a younger Kathrani named Veth. "Intelligence reports indicate approximately 140 vessels, Fleet Master. Mostly smaller than our own." Gorthan made a dismissive sound. "We will crush them in hours. Have the landing forces prepare. I want boots on that planet the moment their fleet is destroyed." But Veth was troubled. Something in the sensor readings did not look right. There were energy signatures at the edge of detection that he could not identify. Patterns that did not match any known human technology. "Fleet Master," he said carefully, "I am detecting unusual readings from the direction of the human core worlds. The configuration is not in our databases." "Retrofitted freighters and patrol boats?" Gorthan replied. "Nothing that can stand against true warships." "You worry too much, Veth. This will be over before it truly begins." Veth did not argue. He returned to his station and continued watching the sensor displays. But the readings bothered him. The energy output was too high, too focused. Something was coming. Something that was not in any of their intelligence files. Something that would change everything in the darkness between stars. The USS Valor and its battle group continued their journey. 60,000 soldiers prepared for what lay ahead. Some prayed. Some wrote letters to loved ones. Some simply stared at the walls and thought about what they were about to do. General Samuel Grant made one final inspection of his troops before the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. He walked through the infantry barracks, the tank bays, the fighter hangars. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing. Professionals, ready for their work. "Know what is at stake?" he told them. 2 million of our people are counting on us. The entire galaxy is watching. Show them what humanity can do." The countdown reached 0. The fleet emerged into normal space, and the battle for New Montana began. The USS Valor and its battle group emerged from faster-than-light travel at the precise coordinates General Samuel Grant had chosen. They were far from the planet, at a distance that most species would consider too far for effective combat. The Kathrani sensors barely registered their arrival as significant. Fleet. Master Gorthon was eating his evening meal when an aide brought him the news. He did not bother to look up from his food. "How many ships?" he asked. "Approximately 140 vessels. Fleet Master." Gorthan made a sound of satisfaction. "As expected, order the fleet to form up for engagement. We will meet them in the outer system and destroy them before they can reach the planet. This will be over quickly." His tactical officer, Veth, studied the sensor readings with growing concern. "Fleet Master, our sensors are experiencing difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" "Intermittent failures. Ghost readings. Some communication channels are becoming unclear. Our technical teams believe it may be interference from solar radiation." Gorthan finally looked up. "There is nothing unusual about this star. Run diagnostics on all systems." But before Veth could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the command ship. Gorthan rose from his meal and moved to the tactical display. What he saw made no sense. His carefully arranged fleet was falling into chaos. Ships were losing contact with each other. Formations were dissolving as captains lost the ability to receive orders. "What is happening?" he demanded. "We do not know, Fleet Master. Our systems are being attacked, but we cannot identify the source. It is as if the humans have reached inside our computers from across the void." On the USS Valor, Major Kevin Hart watched the electronic warfare operation unfold with quiet satisfaction. 30 specialized platforms had launched hours before the main fleet arrived. They had positioned themselves throughout the Kathrani formation, close enough to broadcast, but too small for the enemy sensors to detect. Now, they were doing their work. "Phase 1 complete," Kevin reported to General Grant. "Their fleet is deaf and blind. They cannot talk to each other. They cannot coordinate. Every ship is now fighting alone." Samuel nodded from his command chair. "Execute Phase 2. Cross the darkness of space." 37 stealth bombers dropped their concealment and released their weapons. These craft had launched a day earlier, approaching on carefully calculated paths that kept them hidden from Kathrani's sensors. Each bomber carried precision, guided missiles designed to hit specific targets with devastating accuracy. The Kathrani never saw them coming. Their sensor networks were still drowning in electronic noise when the first missiles struck. 47 critical vessels, carriers that housed smaller attack craft, command ships that coordinated fleet operations, and supply transports that carried ammunition and fuel. All of them disappeared in blooms of fire. Fleetmaster Gorthan watched his tactical display with something approaching disbelief. This is impossible. They are too far away. No weapon has that range with that accuracy. Fleetmaster, we must regroup, Veth urged. We must restore communications. Form a defensive sphere around my vessel, Gorthan commanded. All ships, close ranks. Protect the flagship. But his orders were not being heard. The communication systems that had worked flawlessly for 10,000 years were now useless. His fleet, designed to operate as a single coordinated force, had become 3,000 individual ships, each trying to understand what was happening without any guidance from above. The main human fleet advanced with careful precision. Samuel had divided his forces into 8 task groups, each operating semi-independently according to plans they had practiced for years. They swept into the Kathrani formation like wolves hunting through a herd of confused animals. Human warships were smaller than their Kathrani counterparts, but they were faster and more agile. More importantly, they were equipped with targeting systems that could hit a specific point on an enemy. Shipped from distances the Kathrani could not match. Every human captain understood the battle plan. Every crew knew their role. They could adapt to changing situations without waiting for orders from above. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was not a fight in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of what modern warfare looked like when one side understood it and the other did not. Human vessels would engage Kathrani ships, draw their fire, and then break away while other task groups swept in from unexpected angles. Kathrani commanders, unable to communicate with each other, could not coordinate their responses. They fell back on instinct, which told them to group together for protection. This made them easier targets. By the end of the 6th hour, the Kathrani fleet had lost 800 vessels. Human casualties were 11 ships. Gorthan finally managed to restore partial communications with his surviving captains. He had never experienced anything like this. The humans were not fighting the way wars were supposed to be fought. They were not lining up to exchange fire. They were appearing, striking, and vanishing before his ships could bring their weapons to bear. Order a full retreat, he said. His voice was hollow, emptied of the confidence that had filled it hours before. Fleetmaster. Veth was stunned. We cannot fight what we cannot see or predict. We must withdraw to friendly space, learn from this disaster, and return with new tactics. What Gorthan did not realize was that the humans had already anticipated this decision. A second battle group had been held in reserve on the far side of the system. They were now moving to block the Kathrani retreat path. General Grant had no intention of letting the enemy fleet escape to threaten New Montana again. Meanwhile, on the surface of the planet, the Kathrani ground assault was beginning. Despite the chaos in space, Gorthan had launched his landing craft early in the engagement. 200,000 Kathrani warriors were now descending toward New Montana's primary continent. Colonel Diana Price watched the landing zones from her command bunker deep underground. Satellite feeds showed her everything. Thousands of heavy transports touching down on the Armstrong Plains. Kathrani warriors pouring out in endless waves. Artillery pieces being dragged into position. Let them land, she told her officers. All units hold position. Wait for my command. Major Paul Rodriguez studied the displays with narrowed eyes. They are setting up exactly where we predicted. Right in the kill zones. Anna nodded. They think we are going to meet them in the open. They expect a line of defenders they can overwhelm with numbers. They have no idea what is waiting for them. She watched as the Kathrani forces organized themselves in the traditional manner. Dense columns of infantry. Officers positioned behind the front lines, directing movement with signal flags. war beasts pulling heavy weapons into place. It was an army that had conquered 100 worlds. It was an army that had never faced a professional human military force. Diana checked her communications one final time. Every unit was in position. Every weapon was loaded and ready. Every soldier knew their job. All units, she said, her voice calm and steady, execute Operation Hammer. What followed would become known in human military history as the Battle of Armstrong Plains. 67 minutes of coordinated devastation that destroyed a Kathrani army, changed the way the galaxy thought about humanity forever. But in that moment, as the first artillery shells began to fall, Diana Price was not thinking about history. She was thinking about the 2 million civilians she had sworn to protect. She was thinking about doing her job. War leader Korath had commanded Kathrani ground forces for 30 years. He had fought in 40 campaigns across dozens of worlds. He had never lost an engagement. His warriors were the finest soldiers in the known galaxy, disciplined and fearless, equipped with weapons that had proven effective against every species they had ever encountered. None of that mattered on New Montana, the first artillery. Barrage came from positions that Kathrani sensors could not detect. Human guns had been dug into reinforced bunkers over months of preparation, hidden beneath layers of rock and steel. They opened fire with pinpoint accuracy, guided by satellites that watched every movement on the battlefield below. The shells contained a mixture of high explosive and incendiary compounds. They fell among the Kathrani formations like rain from an angry sky. Warriors who had been standing in neat columns suddenly found themselves surrounded by fire and chaos. Officers screamed orders that no one could hear over the explosions. Korath watched the destruction from his command position and felt the first stirring of doubt. But he pushed it aside. Artillery was an annoyance, nothing more. The solution was simple. Close with the enemy. Get in among their positions where their big guns could not fire without hitting their own troops. All units advance, he commanded. Close with the humans. They cannot stand against us in direct combat. 200,000 Kathrani warriors surged forward across the Armstrong Plains. Their war cries echoed across the landscape, a sound that had made 100 species tremble in fear. They ran toward the human defensive lines with weapons ready. Expecting to overwhelm the defenders through sheer weight of numbers, they met a wall of fire. Human. Infantry positions had been prepared with careful attention to overlapping fields of fire. Soldiers in reinforced bunkers opened up with machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Automatic rifles cracked from hidden positions. Snipers picked off officers in communication, specialists with shots that came from impossible distances. The Kathrani advance slowed. Warriors fell by the hundreds. By the thousands? They kept coming because that was what Kathrani warriors did. They did not retreat. They did not show fear. They pushed forward until they won or until they died. Behind the main defensive lines, mortar teams dropped shells into concentrations of enemy troops with mechanical efficiency. Every time the Kathrani grouped together to organize an assault, explosives fell among them seconds later. It was as if the humans could see everything they did. They could. Satellites in orbit tracked every Kathrani movement. Drones flew overhead, invisible to warriors focused on the battle in front of them. Every piece of information fed back to Colonel Diana Price in her command bunker, giving her a complete picture of the battlefield. 3rd Battalion, shift to support Sector 7, she ordered. Air assets. Target concentration at grid reference 247. 2 attack helicopters swept in low over the battlefield. The Kathrani had never seen such aircraft before. They looked fragile, thin-skinned, and vulnerable. But they carried weapons that could destroy armored vehicles from kilometers away. The helicopters caught Kathrani armored column attempting to flank the human positions. Missiles streaked down from above. In less than a minute, a dozen heavy vehicles were reduced to burning wreckage. The helicopters banked away and disappeared before any return fire could reach them. War. Leader Korath watched his army dying and could not understand what was happening. His warriors were the greatest soldiers in the galaxy. They had conquered world after world. but they could not reach the human lines. Every advance was met with devastating firepower. Every concentration of troops attracted artillery strikes. Every attempt to outflank the defenders was spotted and destroyed. By the third hour, Korath understood he was facing something completely beyond his experience. His forces had taken catastrophic casualties. Nearly half his army killed or wounded without ever reaching the human positions. His artillery had been systematically destroyed by counter-battery fire that came from guns he could not locate. His supply lines had been cut by small teams of human soldiers who appeared from nowhere, struck with terrible precision, and vanished before his warriors could respond. War leader, one of his officers, reported, "We cannot sustain these losses. We must withdraw." Korath looked across the battlefield at the distant human positions. They were barely touched. He could see no sign of the damage his army should have inflicted. It was as if his warriors had spent 3 hours throwing themselves against a wall of steel. "There is nowhere to withdraw to," he replied. His voice was tired, emptied of the aggression that had driven it earlier. "Our fleet is in retreat. Our landing craft have been destroyed by their aircraft. We are stranded here." He was silent for a long moment. Then he made a decision that no Kethrani commander had ever made in 10,000 years of warfare. "Send a surrender request. Perhaps the humans will grant us the mercy we would never have given them." In orbit, the pursuit of the retreating Kethrani fleet had become a rout. General Samuel Grant's intercepting force had caught them in a formation they could not escape. Faster Kethrani ships could have fled, but that would have meant abandoning their slower companions. Kethrani honor did not permit such things, so they fought. And they died. Human missiles struck from distances that Kethrani could not match. Human electronic warfare systems continued to disrupt their coordination. Human damage control teams kept wounded ships fighting while Kethrani vessels fell apart from damage that should have been survivable. By the 10th hour of battle, Fleetmaster Gorthan's once proud armada had been reduced to more than 600 operational vessels. The humans had lost 31 ships. "They are requesting communication," Major Kevin Hart reported. Samuel leaned back in his command chair. "Open a channel." Gorthan's face appeared on the main display. The proud warrior, who had dismissed humanity as prey, now looked exhausted. His 4 eyes were dim with shock and confusion. "Human commander," he said, "I request terms." Samuel studied the alien face for a moment before responding. "I am listening. We will withdraw from this system and recognize human sovereignty over New Montana. We will pay reparations for the damage caused. We ask only that you allow our surviving vessels to depart in peace, and that you grant honorable treatment to our warriors who have surrendered on the surface." Samuel thought about the 2 million civilians who had spent days hiding in shelters, waiting to learn if they would live or die. He thought about the Kethrani ultimatum that had started this war. "Surrender or be destroyed," they had said. "Leave or be killed." "Your forces threatened to million of our citizens," Samuel said. "Your fleet came here to conquer and kill. You expected no resistance. You planned to slaughter civilians who had done nothing to harm you." Gorthan lowered his head. "This is true." "I accept your terms," Samuel continued, "but I am adding one condition. The Kethrani will appear before the Galactic Council and publicly acknowledge what happened here. You will explain to every species watching that humanity is not to be threatened, that our people are under our protection, that anyone who attacks our citizens will face the same response you face today." There was a long silence. Then Gorthan nodded. "It will be done. Your ships may withdraw. Your soldiers on the surface will be treated as prisoners of war and returned to you after processing. We do not torture. We do not execute prisoners." Samuel paused. "We are not you." The channel closed. Around Samuel, his officers began the complex work of transitioning from combat to post-battle operations. Ships needed repair. Wounded needed treatment. Prisoners needed processing, but for a moment, the general simply sat in his chair and looked out at the stars. They had done it. They had protected their people. Now it was time to make sure the rest of the galaxy understood what that meant. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the transmission from New Montana began. Playing on the central display, Ambassador Lisa Monroe had returned to Valeris Prime with recordings of the battle, and the assembled representatives of 400 species watched in stunned disbelief. They saw human warships tearing through a fleet of 3,000 vessels. They saw human soldiers holding defensive positions against overwhelming numbers and barely suffering casualties. They saw Kathrani warriors, feared throughout the galaxy for 10,000 years, throwing down their weapons and surrendering to an enemy they could not touch. But it was the final image that struck the deepest. The surviving Kathrani fleet, limping away from New Montana under human escort. They had been allowed to leave, not because the humans could not destroy them, but because the humans had chosen not to. High Counselor Vexel of the Vorn hegemony had gone pale. His tendrils trembled as he watched the footage. "This cannot be accurate," he said. "This must be manipulated." Observer Kellen of the Mendari rose from his platform. "Our intelligence networks have verified every detail. We have independent sensor recordings from 3 different sources. The humans lost 31 vessels and approximately 400 ground troops. The Kathrani lost over 2,000 ships and 170,000 soldiers." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations at each other. How could the humans have hidden these capabilities? Why had no one warned the Council? What did this mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Lisa Monroe waited for the noise to subside before she began to speak. "The Galactic Council has treated humanity as a minor species for 2 centuries. We were given the worst territories. We received the most limited trade agreements. We were allowed the smallest voice in this chamber. We accepted these conditions because we wanted peace. We wanted to join the galactic community as partners, not as conquerors." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of species that had dismissed her people for generations. "But we will not be victims. We will not allow our citizens to be slaughtered because others believe we are weak. Every human world is protected by forces similar to what you saw at New Montana. Every human citizen is under the protection of a military that has spent centuries learning how to defend those who cannot defend themselves." She paused, letting her words settle into the silence. "We do not want war. We never have. But if war comes to us, we will end it. Decisively, permanently. That is not a threat. It is simply who we are." Fleetmaster Gorthan stepped forward then, as required by the surrender terms. His appearance before the Council was unprecedented. The Kathrani had never publicly acknowledged defeat in their entire history as a spacefaring species. "What the human ambassador says is truth," Gorthan said. His voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. "We attacked them, believing they were prey. We were wrong. They are not prey. They are something this galaxy has never encountered." He turned to face the assembled representatives directly. "My people have fought for 10,000 years. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. We believed ourselves masters of warfare. The humans taught us otherwise in a single day." Gorthan paused, and when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of bitter experience. "I advise every species present, do not make the mistake we made. Do not assume that human kindness is weakness. Do not assume that their preference for peace means they cannot make war. They can. They choose not to. That choice is a gift. Respect it." In the weeks that followed, the political landscape of the galaxy began to shift. Species that had been dominated by the Kathrani for thousands of years started seeking alliances with humanity. The Mendari Collective proposed a formal partnership, offering their vast intelligence networks in exchange for military cooperation. Even High Counselor Vexel, his pride damaged but his political instincts sharp as ever, approached Lisa Monroe about renegotiating human trade agreements. On New Montana, reconstruction was already underway. Governor Patricia Chen had returned from the orbital shelters to find her world scarred but unbroken. Human engineers worked alongside Kathrani prisoners to repair the damage. The prisoners were treated fairly, given food and shelter and medical care. Many of them had never experienced such treatment from a victorious enemy. General Samuel Grant remained in the system for another month, overseeing the transition to peacetime operations. When he finally prepared to return to Earth, Governor Chen came to see him off. "General," she said, "I do not know how to thank you." Samuel shook his head. "Do not thank me, Governor. Thank the 60,000 soldiers who answered the call. Thank the families who waited back home, not knowing if their loved ones would return. This is what we do. This is why we serve." He looked out at the planet below, green and blue and alive with 2 million human souls who had faced death and survived. "We protect our own," he said. "That is all. That is everything." Back on Earth in a small apartment in Denver, Marine Sergeant Emma Brooks sat with her young son on her lap. He was only 4 years old, too young to understand what his mother had done on a distant world. The news was playing on the screen, showing footage from New Montana, explaining to the citizens of Earth what had happened. Her son looked up at her with curious eyes. "Mama, what did you do?" Emma thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about the fear and the noise and the chaos of combat. She thought about her fellow Marines holding the line beside her. She thought about the 2 million civilians they had protected. "I helped some people who needed help," she said finally. "That is all." Her son nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to playing with his toys. Emma held him close and said nothing more. Some things did not need explanation. Some things were simply who you were, what you did, when the moment came. That was what the galaxy had learned at New Montana. That was what humanity truly was. Not conquerors. Not monsters. Just people willing to stand up when standing up was needed. People who protected their own. And that perhaps was the most frightening thing of all. Because the galaxy had finally realized that humanity did not fight wars to gain territory or resources or glory. They fought to protect. They fought because they cared about their people. And there was nothing more dangerous than an enemy who fought not for themselves, but for those they loved. The message had been sent. The galaxy had received it. And things would never be the same. In the Great Chamber on Valeris Prime, Galactic Council continued to meet and argue and make deals. But now, when the human ambassador spoke, the other species listened. They remembered the footage from New Montana. They remembered the Kathrani fleet burning in the void. They remembered what happened when you threatened humanity, and they chose, wisely, to make peace instead of war.